Talk about communication. I'm not the best communicator, but I am making the effort to communicate to you right now. I'm making the effort to say to my grandchildren and my children and those who are interested, act upon good choices. Here are some experiences you might learn from. Here's some funny stories. But one of the most important things you can do with your spouse, your children, your family, the people you work with, is communicate with them. Say, I like this, and it can be summed up this way. Learn to say difficult things in soft ways. Communicate. Learn how to say difficult things in soft ways. And then realize that you're half the problem. My dad always used to say, if you think there's a problem, go look in the mirror and maybe you'll find at least half the problem. I'm always half the problem, if not more. Okay? But always be open to the idea that we live in a society and with families where it's not always easy to get along. But be able to try to communicate in a nice, kind way. And even if you have to yell, sometimes it's better to communicate. But one of the things they teach you in anger management is to describe what will happen if things continue to go the way they are. So try to give a picture of the results of the behavior rather than just giving the results of the behavior. Try to help people understand that, try to communicate, try to help people understand what you're thinking, and then try to listen to what they're saying. Try to put yourself in their shoes. Try to be kind with others and understanding. Avoid arguments. I grew up in a family where my dad was easy to argue. He would argue at the drop of a dime. My mom was very kind, loving, she tried to avoid arguments as much as possible. She tried to be gentle and loving. My dad was raised by 3 boys. My mom was, raised in a family of 3 boys, him and 2 brothers, and they constantly argued, argued. They grew up in a kind of a fighting society. My mother grew up with 2 sisters or 3 daughters, and it was a more mellow environment. So I saw kindness and calmness, and I also saw a lot of arguing and disagreements. I'm not saying that you don't argue or disagree. I'm just saying that you do it in a soft way. But avoiding arguments. My nephew, I asked my nephew Jason, a favorite friend of mine, I says, how do you avoid problems? And he said just that, you avoid them. Yeah, you simply don't go to that point of argument. You avoid the argument. And that made a lot of sense to me. I forget it quite often, but I'm very apt to argue or jump in to try to defend or protect. But anyway, avoiding arguments is really important. Sometimes bad things are said during arguments, which you'll regret later on. But I'm going to also go back to, you need to communicate. If you think or feel something, try to tell people and express to them how you think and feel, what it feels like. You may not be able to make sense to them in a logical way, but if you can express to them how you feel, it may make a difference. But I also do feel many times in my life alone. And I believe we are individuals. We're not a blob of 4 people walking around together. We are individuals in families or in relationships. Try to know that you're a child of God, and that you need to try to avoid arguments as much as possible. Say things that are difficult in a nice way, and therefore you're going to communicate well.